I've just gotta say, Atlus has been on a wild ride these past couple of years. Between all their remakes and remasters and spin-offs and a couple heavy hitters here and there, they have reminded us why they're one of the most important RPG studios in the entire world, because they've put out a pretty frickin' stacked lineup over this past couple of years, but stacked doesn't always mean consistent. While some of these games might feel like filler side quests, others are adventures that will stick with you for your life. So today, we're going to be ranking every single modern Atlus release from this decade from worst to best. We're talking 2020 releases all the way up to present day 2025, and I definitely do think that's worth sub as you come and you join our party and you level on up with me. With your sub, your like, and your brand new hype, that helps me out a ton. So let's grab our evokers, sharpen our long swords, and summon Jack Frost, because this is going to be a wild ride. First up at number 15, we have Persona 5 The Phantom X, released in 2025. Yeah, we're starting off with the one that I'm sure all y'all expected to be at the bottom. This here is a mobile-first spin-off that tries to capture the slick style and addictive life sim meets dungeon crawling formula of Persona 5, but on your telephone. And while there is some novelty in seeing Persona mechanics adapted for the shorter sessions, it does fall into the same traps that so many mobile RPGs do. You know, like the gacha systems, the constant reminders to spend your money, and a watered-down progression loop. There is fun to be had in the early game, but it never escapes the shadow of feeling like a monetization machine wearing a Joker's mask. So if you want the Persona experience, you're better off playing literally any other entry on this entire list. Even if it's not Persona, you're still better off playing it. And speaking of some missed opportunities, Atlus tried something similar with a much older name in their catalog with number 14, Soul Hackers 2, released in 2022. Personally, I really wanted to like this one. Soul Hackers hadn't really seen the light of day in decades, and then Atlus decided to bring it back as a sleek cyberpunk RPG revival. How cool is that? Not so much, because the result came a game that feels like it's stuck between trying to modernize SMT and also still trying to appeal to a Persona crowd and not really doing what Soul Hackers did back in the day. The combat system itself does have some good bones. I mean, you're exploiting your weaknesses and you're stacking bonuses and all that kind of good stuff, but the dungeon design, painfully bland, and the cast, equally as bland. It's not unplayable, it's just aggressively meh. And for such a long way to return, that's a shame. At least though with the next one, Atlus went in a totally different direction, blending their most popular series with another genre altogether with number 13, Persona 5 Strikers, released in 2020. This here is Dynasty Warriors meets Persona, and it sounds like a fever dream, and honestly, the execution is kind of better than you'd think. The story actually works as kind of like a road trip sequel to Persona 5, giving fans more time with Joker and the gang. The problem though is the gameplay. It's flashy at first, but repetitive after a few hours. The hack and slash combat system just doesn't have that staying power of a traditional RPG, and if you're not already a Persona superfan, the novelty wears thin quickly. Still, it is a cool crossover experiment that could have been so much more. However, if Strikers was an experiment, the next one was a gamble that leaned heavily on story over gameplay with number 12, ironically, 13 Sentinels, Aegis Rim. Okay, I'm getting up my flame shield for this one because I know a bunch of y'all love this game and I can totally see why you loved it. But this is my list, and quite frankly, I didn't love it. I hated it. Don't get me wrong, it's gorgeous and all that, and Vanillaware built an insanely ambitious sci-fi narrative with 13 different protagonists and timelines twisting together like a plate of spaghetti, but as a story experience, it's wild, creative, and almost unlike anything else in the genre. But as a game, though, The real-time strategy battles just felt tacked on, and I don't like visual novels. So spending 80% of my time clicking through the painfully boring dialogue just sucked. Personally, I respect the ambition a ton, but in a lineup that's ranked like this and stacked with so many good games and based on my own personal opinion, I didn't like it. It's more interactive novel than anything else, but if you want something more traditional gameplay-wise, Atlus did have you covered with their tactical spin on Persona, with number 11, Persona 5 Tactica, released in 2023. On paper, this here was a slam dunk. Persona meets grid-based tactics. What a cool crossover! And to its credit, Tactica does nail that Persona flavor with its stylish menus, unique character skills, and even like all-out attacks in tactical form. But it's also like super easy the entire way through, and that chibi art, I don't know, just feels a little bit cheap to me. Don't get me wrong though, I had fun with it, and this could have been Atlus's like Fire Emblem Awakening moment. But instead, it feels more like their Eternal Eyes moment. Yeah. Of course though, whenever it does come to remakes, Atlus wasn't afraid to revisit the classics either with number 10, Persona 3 Reload in 2024. This here is quite a tricky one to rank because as a remake, Persona 3 Reload does a lot right. It has gorgeous visuals, new voice acting, reworked mechanics, and it makes the original game way more approachable. But at the same time, it's also missing some of the features from Persona 3 FES and Portable, which is ridiculous to say the least. Why does the PS5 game not have what a PS2 or a PSP game had? There's really no excuse for it. And without that extra content, it just doesn't feel like definitive, you know what I mean? Still though, if you do want to dive into one of the darkest, most emotional Persona stories ever told, this is the easiest way to do it. Reload is a great entry point into the series, but it stops just short of being the perfect version of the game. However, this wasn't the only PS2 classic that they remastered, because they also did number 9, Raidou Kuzunoha Remastered, The Mystery of the Soulless Army in 2025. Here's a blast from the past. Atlus dusted off this PS2 cult classic about a demon summoning detective in Taisho era Japan, and then gave it like a shiny new coat of paint. The Raidou games always felt like hidden gems, you know, a mix of action combat, quirky detective work, and those usual SMT demon fusions. But while the original was clunky to say the least, the remaster amps it up a notch and makes it playable for a modern audience. They give it like an important history lesson here. It's fascinating, and it's worth experiencing if you want to see a side of Atlus outside their, their usual Persona, SMT comfort zone. But from obscure detective RPGs, Atlus also made sure to preserve one of the most hardcore series too, with number 8, Etrian Odyssey Origins Collection, released in 2023. This is one of those series that feels almost timeless once you get into it. These games are all about the pure joy of dungeon crawling, carefully mapping every hallway and hidden passage, balancing out your resources so you don't push your party too far, and building your own custom team from scratch. And the Origins collection is basically like the perfect way to revisit the first 3 entries. The new features like auto mapping and improved quality of life tweaks make the whole thing so much more approachable without losing that like old school challenge. Personally, I really enjoy games like these. You know, that like deliberate strategic gameplay, the turn-based combat, and the job class systems. It just scratches the same itch as cracking open graph paper as a kid and drawing your way through an RPG dungeon. Sure, it's not for everyone, but it's definitely for me. Over on the opposite end of the spectrum though, Atlus also put one of the most colorful anime-styled crossovers. In number 7, Tokyo Mirage Sessions FE Encore, released in 2020. Oh yeah, the game that made half the fanbase roll their eyes, and the other half cheer with girlish glee. Tokyo Mirage Sessions is essentially like Persona meets Trails with some ease sprinkled in, wrapped up in like an idol pop star story. It's flashy, colorful, and surprisingly heartfelt if you do give it a chance. Sure, it is a bit goofy too, but the combat system's genuinely fun, and the Encore version makes it so much more polished. It isn't for everybody, but if you can embrace the sheer anime energy, there's a lot to love here. But though, if you do want something a little bit less goofy and more refined, Atlus already has you covered with the crown jewel, number 6, Persona 5 Royal. This here is the ultimate version of Persona 5, plain and simple. And Royal doesn't just add like a little bit of bonus content. It overhauls the entire experience with brand new mechanics, story beats, and an entire 3rd semester that fleshes out your characters even more. Yeah, it's long, and yeah, it's familiar, especially if you already sunk over 100 hours to the original Persona 5, but to this day, it is the definitive Persona experience, and as such, it deserves a high spot on this list. It is proof that Atlus does know how to take a great game and make it somehow even better. But Persona was not the only franchise to get its definitive edition treatment, because so did number 5, Shin Megami Tensei III Nocturne HD Remastered, released in 2020. Man, They're really going all out with this PS2 remasters, aren't they? Well, I've just got to say, this one here is legendary, and it's what got me into the SMT series back in the day, because the first two ones over on the SNES weren't ever released here in America. And now this HD remaster brings it to modern platforms with quality of life improvements. Is it still brutally hard? Well, absolutely, it's SMT. And is the voice acting just a little bit awkward? Yeah, that too. But the atmosphere, the demon negotiation system, the apocalyptic vibe, it all hits just as hard today as it did back then. So for fans who never got to play the original, this remaster is essential. And speaking of essentials, Atlus was not done pushing Shin Megami Tensei into the modern age with number 4, Shin Megami Tensei V, released in 2021. When SMT V dropped, it felt like a statement. Atlus was bringing their hardcore series into the HD era with massive open worlds, slick visuals, and refined combat. The story is a little bit sparse compared to Persona, but that's always been SMT's thing. That's what it does best. It's more about the ideology, the choices, and survival. The demon fusion system is addicting, the battles are tense, and it finally gives the series a chance to shine on the Switch. It's a strong entry, even if it did leave room for improvement, and wouldn't you know it, Atlus wasted no time in creating that improvement with number 3, Shin Megami Tensei V Vengeance, in 2024. This here takes that solid foundation of SMT V and cranks it up a notch, adding in a brand new storyline, expanded areas, more demons, and refined mechanics. It feels like the definitive version of the game, the way that Persona 5 Royal is to the original Persona 5. So for anybody who bounced off SMT V the first time around, Vengeance is the version still worth playing. It is proof that Atlus listens, at least, sometimes, and it elevates SMT V into one of the best modern RPGs that they've ever made. But Atlus was not the only studio under their umbrella making waves, because the next game came out swinging with something entirely different, and that's number 2, Unicorn Overlord, released in 2024. Vanillaware came back with a vengeance with Unicorn Overlord. This here is a tactical RPG that feels like a love letter to the classics, like Ogre Battle and Fire Emblem. The art is jaw-dropping, the strategy systems are deep without being overwhelming, and the pacing is absolutely addicting. It's one of those games that you'll start playing for an hour, until you suddenly realize it's, 3 AM and you gotta go to bed. It shows that Atlus can still publish bold, creative RPGs outside of Persona and SMT, and it deserves every bit of praise that it gets. I absolutely adore it. But now, we finally arrived at the crown jewel of this entire era with our number 1, Metaphor ReFantazio, released in 2024. Here it is, Atlus's boldest new IP in decades, and honestly, they nailed it. Metaphor ReFantazio feels like the culmination of everything that the Persona team learned over the years, but instead, they went and they applied it to a full-blown fantasy world. High school, studying, part-time jobs, and dating melodrama is gone! And instead, it's replaced with an adult storyline, stunning art direction, and combat that blends Persona-style turn-based battles along with fresh mechanics and a fantastical world building that just feels massive. This isn't just like Persona, but medieval. It's its own beast, and one that could define Atlus's next era. And after years of milking Persona 5, Atlus finally gave us something new, and it absolutely deserves this number 1 spot. So there you have it, every single modern Atlus game ranked from worst to best. From mobile gacha spin-offs to bold new worlds, it's been a roller coaster of quality. There's been some missteps, sure, but also some of the best RPGs of this generation. But now I do want to hear from you. What is your favorite modern Atlus game, and where would you rank them all differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you had fun with this little breakdown, level on up and join my party by subscribing. Until next time, keep all your demons fused and your velvet room key handy. And as always, have a good day.